Hello and welcome to the Freedom Frequency Podcast. I'm your host, Kaya, energy healer, psychic channel, and spiritual mentor for women who are ready to ditch the spiritual rulebook, release the pressure and overwhelm, and let go of all that comparison that makes you feel like what you're doing isn't enough. In this podcast, I'm going to share bits of my journey with you, as well as my wisdom and knowledge to show you that spirituality gets to be something that works for you and not something that you work for. Now let's dive into today's episode. Hello. I hope everyone is having an amazing week. Today I want to talk a little bit about how I developed my psychic gifts and started channeling. So something that I get asked a lot is just that question. So I often get asked how did you know you were psychic? How did you develop your gifts? Just all kinds of questions like that. And I just want to jump in, talk about it a little bit, see what comes through. So the first piece that I want to touch on here and mention is that everyone is psychic. Literally everyone has psychic gifts. So something that is a huge misconception is a lot of people believe that you're born a psychic or you're not, and that some people are not. But in all reality, we're actually all born psychic, and it's just a matter of whether or not we decide in our lifetime to tap into that, right? So it's about the path that you're on and what you choose. So I know that for me, for a long time in my life, I did believe that. I did believe that some people are psychic and some people are not, and obviously I'm not. Obviously, I'm not, because otherwise I would already know, kind of thing. And I believe too that it was something generational, because you always hear about I'm an 8th generation psychic or an 8th generation healer or whatever. And so I was under the impression that it was something that you just had in you, or something that you didn't. And when I really started to understand that we all are psychic and we all can have these abilities and we all do have them, and it's just a matter of tapping into them or not, it really opened my eyes to hey, I actually kind of do want to do this, because my whole life I had been very curious about mediums and psychics and things like that. And in that, there's so much more I could say on that. Just the way that I grew up, all of that was considered very taboo. So I it was one of those things that I was interested in, but I felt it was bad. And so I just never thought of myself that way, because I didn't feel I kind of thought if I was psychic, I would just already know. I would already have all these things unlocked. I would be able to do all these things people are doing, and they're just magic and all this stuff. But then there was another layer of me that felt well, it's a good thing that I'm not psychic, because it's bad. It's taboo. It's wrong, right? And I also felt that it was just something that you either were fully in it or you weren't. So it wasn't something that you really developed. It was something that you just you were either fully psychic or you weren't. So you either could do all of these things out of nowhere, or you didn't. And so I was really interested in people who were psychic. One of the things in my life is I'm very interested in occult type things. That's just always been who I am. So a lot of my life I was really drawn to TV shows like Long Island Medium, or I had a friend who had a medium at her birthday party, and it was this whole thing. I didn't tell my parents, and I wanted to do it, and it was very cool to me that she could channel all this information and know all this stuff about me without me knowing her. And it was all so cool to me. And there's a part of me that always felt I kind of wish I could do that. It's kind of cool, but that's not me. And now in hindsight, I look back at that kind of thing, and I think those were all nudges. They were all nudges in the direction of this path, and the path that I'm on now, and doing this work. Because back then, I would be drawn to these things, and I was kind of the universe being come on, wake up, you like this kind of stuff, you can do this too. And I would always be in the mindset of oh, I wish I could do that. Oh, I can't, oh well. And it wasn't until recent years later, now in this kind of chunk of my life where I'm really diving into the spiritual work, and I'm really like immersed in this world and like in contact with a lot of people who do use their spiritual gifts, who do use their psychic gifts. And it was like only a couple years ago that I really kind of discovered and like learned, I guess, that I could do this too. And that kind of like, it was one of those moments where like everything came in and clicked for me, because I was like, oh my gosh, like I've always wanted to do this kind of stuff, and I just kind of thought I couldn't, right? Like society kind of like steers our direction that way, like not everyone can do this, it's bad to do this, or whatever it may be. So for me to unlock that, I was like, oh my gosh, like I want to do this kind of stuff. But then there was still those layers of like, oh, like I don't know how, like, you know, what do I do? Like, do I just say like, okay, I want to do these things? Like, do I take a course? Do I have to like do something? Like, and it was just kind of this unknown. And it wasn't until I kind of started stumbling across more like spiritual mentors in the space that like I started to learn that this was just something that like I could work on, and I could make the choice that I wanted to like open my channel and things like that. So that's kind of what I want to dive into, is like how I started to open my channel, how I started to develop my psychic gifts from scratch, like from not ever, like I don't have any stories really of like when I was a child and like, you know, this and that happened or whatever, like that. I don't really have memories of that, at least, like that wasn't really my story. So I really want to share with you how like I went from thinking I had like zero intuition, zero psychic gifts, to like now feeling like so much more tapped into them. So I'm going to share this in like 3 parts, and this is like my story, but also obviously there's something that you can learn from here too, if you're thinking like, oh, I really want to like unlock my psychic gifts, I want to start doing like channeling and stuff myself, whether it's for work and, you know, sharing this work like I do, or whether it's just for yourself, then this will be helpful for you. So the part 1 I've already touched on is opening your channel. So this involves like multiple pieces, but kind of like the main pieces that fell into place for me were, 1, realizing that like my spirit guides are always trying to connect with me. Like the universe is always sending me signs. It's always showing me like synchronicities. Like I even think like growing up, I used to love like when the clock was like 11:11, like I would always be like 11:11, make a wish. And it was like this whole thing. But really starting to realize that like, oh, this is like the universe communicating with me, right? So I started to like open my channel in the way of like asking for signs. Like basically it's like the universe is always trying to connect with you, and it's like, are you open? Like, are you open to receive? Because a lot of us are like not paying attention. We're not asking for signs. We're not asking for information. We're not like saying like, I'm open to receiving the guidance right now. So we're kind of like sitting around thinking like, oh, like, are my psychic gifts gonna turn on? Like, do you know what I mean? But like, we're actually not doing anything to like open that channel, right? Because it's like a 2-way channel where we're asking for something, we're putting something out there, like some kind of energy, some frequency, and then we're receiving it back. So it's not always just us like, sorry, I'm like looking at someone outside. It's not always just us like waiting around and being like, okay, channel's open, universe, are you dropping stuff in for me? It's a matter of like us saying like, yeah, like I'm open, I want to receive guidance, spirit guides, help me, universe, help me, God, help me, like whoever you resonate with. And really starting to ask for signs, ask for synchronicities, notice the signs, notice the synchronicities, right? So when we're actually given, like when you see a number like 444 or something like that happens to a lot of us. Then like, instead of just being like, oh, 444, cool. Sometimes like take a moment and think, oh, 444, like, okay, what is the universe trying to connect with me right now? Because those types of signs and synchronicities are often the universe trying to like say, hey, get your attention, right? And there's something to share. So I was starting to, in the beginning of this journey, really start to be open to whatever was coming through, and not being picky and not saying like, oh, I don't know what this means, it's probably nothing. Like, you know what I mean? I think in the beginning, like, we can get really caught up in like, okay, so I saw an angel number, like, cool, like 2s or something, and we look up the meaning and we're like, okay. But sometimes it's not so much about the number you saw, but it's just like, oh, hey, I saw something. Oh, communication. Like, I need to open up the line of communication. So it's not just a matter of like, oh, I saw like 555. It's change and transformation. Cool. It's like, oh, okay, here's 555. Let me take a moment. Like, if I have space, like if I'm not like, you know, in a party or whatever, but like take a moment and just say like, okay, I'm listening. What's here? And see if there's a message coming through. And for me, another way this really showed up when like I was starting this journey and like starting to open up my channel and, you know, that kind of thing, the universe would often communicate with me through like ringing in my ears. So like I'm clairaudient and I often hear like ringing in my ears, and over the years it's gotten stronger, where like in the beginning it'd be like this weird little ringing, and then now it's like actually like quite loud. And every time I hear the ringing, I would stop and just take a moment and like close my eyes and breathe in and say like, okay, I'm listening. And just assume that every time I heard the ringing, that it was the universe saying like, hey, slow down, tune in, like we have something to share with you. And that's when I really started to receive messages, and not always in the way that I thought I would. So I feel like I had like a 3-part to this chat, but like we're just gonna go where it goes, people. So part of this too for me was like understanding the clairsenses. So I won't get into like all of them and like turn this into like a masterclass on like information, but the clairsenses essentially are just like different ways you can receive information. So it's like hearing, seeing, whatever. And for me, like we all have all of them, but it's like some of them are more strong for different people. So for me, like clairvoyance, like is probably the most common, where people like see things. Like that's probably like the weakest one for me, where like sometimes I see things, but it's very faint and it's not clear, and like it's kind of like I don't actually see it with my eyes too. It's hard to explain. But for me, the clairaudience with the ringing in the ears is a strong one, but the strongest one for me is actually like the inner knowing. So like I just have this knowing, like claircognizance and clairsentience, where I know and I feel something. So I often receive information, like if you've done any type of channeling with me, I'll receive information 99% of the time through an inner knowing. Like all of a sudden this like information just pops in my head and I'm like, I know this. And then that's it. Like I don't like often see a vision. Sometimes I do, but sometimes it's like, it's not even seeing the vision, but it's like feeling the essence of the vision. So I'll be like, oh, there's like this flower present right now. And maybe I don't actually see the flower, but I'll feel the presence of the flower, and I'll have this like inner knowing that it's there. And so it's kind of interesting, because when I started to realize that like it wasn't all just about like literally hearing something or literally seeing something, I started to trust a little bit more in what was coming through and start to say like, okay, so like I'm feeling like this, so like maybe that's the message. Like all of a sudden this thought popped into my head, like maybe that's the message. Maybe I didn't have to like see something or hear something or receive like a physical sign of something. So that was like a huge piece for me in developing. And then of course, hand in hand with this just comes practice. So trusting and practicing is kind of like my part 2, my 3-part plan here, is trusting and practicing. So once I started to realize like how things were coming in most often for me, then I started to be able to trust in that a little bit more and practice with those things. So like I said before, when I would hear the ringing in my ears, instead of like just thinking like, oh cool, like ringing or whatever, I would actually start to tune in. So I would practice. So every time I heard it, if I had space and I wasn't like in a group of people where I wouldn't be able to focus, I would start to slow down and tune in and see what came through. And in that, I started to get more messages, get more confident in the messages that were coming through. And I started to play with the messages, right? Because sometimes we get these messages from the universe and we think like, oh, cool, like that came through. And then we don't actually like act on it and implement it and like take it in and use it. So that's when I really started to like play with that, right? Play with like using the information that I was given and watching how that unfolded, which created more trust. And something I speak to a lot, like here on my page with my clients and everything as well, is like practicing with small things. So like when you're starting to trust your intuition and trust your channel, then start with small things, because oftentimes it feels like we can't trust and there's a lot of pressure when it's something that's like, it feels like there's a lot at stake. Like, I'm really wanting to manifest this and I'm looking for guidance. Like, can I trust this? Like, you know, whatever. So I always start with things like, okay, what do I feel like having for breakfast today? Do I want to work in this room or that room today? And I just start like trusting those inner nudges where it feels like nothing's at stake. But in reality, like, everything I do every day is heading in the right direction to what I'm desiring to manifest, whether it seems small or not, right? Like, the micro shifts really make up a lot. I talk about that all the time. So like, working in this room instead of that room today could lead me to like be inspired by something else or like whatever, right? Different conversation for another day. So the second piece is the trust and the practice. And that's really where patience comes into, because I think often when we're trying to like unlock psychic gifts and we want to like, you know, start channeling, start connecting to our intuition more and our higher selves, whatever, we often get impatient. We're like, we want it to be like this light switch where it's like, I decided I'm going to tap in and now all of a sudden I am 100% confident in it. I can trust. I'm getting very clear information. Like, and for some people it happens faster than others too, right? Like, for some people, like, they can start getting really clear information sooner. But a lot of it, I genuinely think comes down to like your trust in yourself and also your belief in it, right? Like, if you believe that it's all going to unlock quicker for you, then that's an energy and that's going to come into fruition. So the final piece that I want to touch on here is becoming aware of your patterns and your ego. Like, and this is where a big part of it comes into like inner work. So it's the first two pieces are really important, where you're opening your channel, you're starting to become aware of how things might be coming through for you, and then you're practicing and trusting. And those things alone can create a lot of momentum. But the third piece that I think is super important that a lot of people maybe like don't dive into deep enough is the inner work. Like, the inner work of like noticing when your ego is coming in, being super self-aware, emotionally intelligent, and starting to notice your own patterns of like how your ego comes into play, how self-sabotage shows up for you. Because when we're practicing with our intuition, and we start to practice on things that like matter more to us besides like breakfast and stuff, right? When we start to like use our intuition to like run our business or like handle things in our career, our relationships, our health, whatever it is for you, whatever you're manifesting, then it's like the stakes are a little bit higher. And so that's when the ego can start to come in and trick us, and self-sabotage can start to come in and trick us. And we start to lose sight of discernment between our intuition and our ego. And we start to think like, oh, like, I'm leaning towards doing this. And then it's like, okay, well, was that intuition or was that ego? And it's really important to be able to tell the difference for yourself of what each one feels like in the body when the decision is made. And it's so quick that when we have an intuitive hit, the ego can sneak in right after. And we can sometimes feel like, oh, my intuition's guiding me to do this, or my spirit guide sent me a message to do this, when in reality, it was your ego under disguise. So this is where it's really important to have self-awareness, notice your own patterns of how things play out for you, and like do the inner work that helps you to uncover these kinds of things, right? Because the more aware we are and the more like healing work that we're doing, the more we're going to understand ourselves, and we're going to understand the way that we self-sabotage, the way that our ego likes to sneak in. And as we're doing this work too, we start to kind of peel layers of the ego back in general, so that when our intuition's coming through and our ego sneaks in after, not only are we more aware of it, but it's also not as strong of a feeling, if that makes sense. That's what I've found in my own journey. So I feel complete. I feel like that's everything I want to say in this live for information. But what I do want to say as well is, if you are in a place where you are wanting to develop your intuition, sorry, my throat's getting so dry, where you're wanting to develop your intuition, you're wanting to go deeper with this, you're wanting to work on your psychic gifts, and you feel like you're kind of hitting a wall with it, you're hitting a wall with the inner work piece, you're hitting a wall with the trust piece, whatever it is, I would love to invite you into a few different ones of my offerings where I can help you with this. The first one being a new program that I have coming out soon. I'm going to be running it live for the first round, and then I don't know if I'll run it live ever again. So if you want to be in it live with me, highly encourage it. I don't want to release too many of the details right now or make any promises on it, but there is going to be like live energy healing and activation components, as well as pre-recorded or live modules. And this program is going to be all around spiritual awakening. There's going to be a module in this on this exact topic, like awakening your psychic gifts, trusting your channel, like all that kind of stuff, more on the clairsenses and everything like that. But besides that, there's also going to be other modules that are supportive in your spiritual awakening, whether you are just starting out and you're like, I'm overwhelmed, or you're already in the thick of it and you just want a little bit of support. So we're going to be covering all kinds of topics around like, you know, laws of the universe, trust and surrender, like navigating relationships during your spiritual awakening, like all kinds of good stuff. And it's going to be live support from me, which is great. And aside from that, if that's not like the kind of thing you're looking for right now in a group setting, I do also offer one-to-one containers. So I do have a short-term container that I'm launching really soon, but I also have long-term mentorship for 3 months or more. If you're looking to really dive deep, really develop your psychic gifts, and really have someone who's going to support you in this, someone who's been through it, and someone who's going to be able to like help guide you, help channel for you as well. And like, I find too that like in my own journey developing my psychic channel, having a spiritual mentor was like so big for me, because I had someone I can go to with the questions on my journey, so I wasn't like lost. But also it helped me to trust more in my channel, because like she would channel information for me and I would channel information for myself, and it was kind of a way for me to get like a confirmation. It's the same thing with like oracle cards. It's like a way to first tune into yourself, tune into your own wisdom, and then have a confirmation. So not that you always need that, but especially at the beginning of your journey, or like not even the beginning, but as you're working on developing your own gifts, it's sometimes nice to have someone who can kind of like reflect things for you, be a sounding board, like have a layer of confirmation as you're working on developing your own trust, your own intuition. So if you are interested in working with me one-on-one, send me a message. And also if you're interested in the group program, send me a message too, because I have a wait list going for that, because it hasn't been released fully yet, but it will be soon. So yeah, if you have any questions about anything I covered here, send me a message. Send me a message for everything. I love to chat with you guys. And then yeah, drop anything in the comments if you'd like, and I'll catch you on the next one.